Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. Today's book review is on the title A Taste of Gold and Iron. The author is Alexandra Rowland. This is not their first book. I think they have published a couple other fantasies previously, but first time author for me. So what is this book about? I remember reading on the NetGalley description that this is a fantasy romance, male romance, and bodyguard romance, and I said sign me up. So I think that those are pretty decent descriptions, tropes, keywords, but let me tell you a little bit about the premise as I am just about reaching the midpoint so far of this book. The book opens with one of our main characters, Cadeau. He is praying and thankful and giving praise because his sister, the Sultan, has just given birth and he now has a new niece. And that niece is actually above him in line of succession, and Cadeau is excited about this. He's happy about this. And we learn pretty quickly that that is because Cadeau thinks of himself as cowardly, and he deals a lot with anxiety and what sound to me like panic attacks. So if that is an issue for you, just know that going in that one of our main characters is regularly dealing with a lot of anxiety and regularly dealing with panic attacks and issues, and he's pretty harsh on himself regarding these aspects of his personality. On this night that his niece is born, there are a number of events that are happening sort of around the city and the country that require the monarchy or the people in charge to do something about this. And because his sister is indisposed because she's in labor and then has a brand new baby, he has to kind of step up and do a couple, kind of just take care of a couple things. For whatever reasons that I am a little unclear about, someone who is his niece's baby daddy, but like who's like a foreign dignitary or something, like basically accuses Cadeau of him stepping forward and trying to help out with these things as like a treasonous, you're trying to take over and overthrow your sister situation, which didn't really make very much sense to me, but okay. So he kind of basically gets in trouble, and this his a reaction to this man's accusations, and also something that goes down the next day at a hunt, or a couple days later at a hunt, is very troubling, and he is in a lot of trouble with his sister, the Sultan. And Zaliha actually like sort of threatens to kind of temporarily exile him, but he convinces her that he needs to stay in town. But as part of his punishment, I guess, for what has transpired, she assigns him a new top primary guard. Now, in this culture, which is super interesting, the guards that are running around in the palace and who help guard the dignitaries and the Sultan and the Sultan's family are more than just guards. These are people who are educated and who've come up the ranks and eventually will go on to be governors and magistrates and ministers and help hold parts of the legal process and hold positions of power. But also it seems like a lot of them sort of take turns at before you progress to those levels. When you're young, you kind of go through the ranks of being a sort of soldier cadet, and then you're part of, if you are part of the inner core, make it to the royal palace level of guarding the palace people, you are part of the Kaya, you are part of the palace Kayalar. The words in this book are really great. There's definitely a hint of Turkey and of France, which makes a lot of sense considering this is supposed to be reminiscent of the Ottoman Empire. So I thought that there was a lot of really cool like words tossed in, including this one, Kaya. So the Sultan, Zaliha, assigns a new primary Kaya to Cadeau, and this person is going to super make sure that Cadeau is following all the rules. So that's sort of the really start of the book, and then over the course of the next little bit, there's basically the plot of the book is that Cadeau is trying to do some investigating on some of those events that happened on the night of the Sultan giving birth. And so that he is sort of investigating this plot and trying to find out why things don't seem to be adding up. There's also an element that makes this a fantasy romance where there are people across this kingdom who have the ability to touch metals and then can sort of taste them. They have a signature when you are touching them that tells you what the makeup of that metal is, like how much gold it is, how much silver it is, etc., etc. People who are extremely sensitive with this gift can even sort of detect where this copper or metal, gold, silver, whatever, has been mined geographically. And this country in particular has always really, the base foundation of this whole country, and what one of the main things that they stand for is that their coin is X% gold. It is a standard, and it is what they pride themselves on. And if you know that you are getting a gold piece minted in this country, that it's legit. And so that's part of what's going on with this investigation, is number of counterfeit coins have cropped up, and they're very good, and only like fine metal tasters can tell that they are counterfeit, but they are such a good copycat and good counterfeit and good fakes that it could cause international problems if other countries think that this country is like debasing and lowering the value of their coin. So that is part of what the investigation is going on with Cadeau, and he is dragging along his top Kaya, who is the other sort of love interest in this book. I don't even know if I've said his name. I think his name is pronounced Evermare, is how I've been saying it. But yes, so he is super judgmental of his prince, his liege at the start, and over the course of the book, he starts to understand a little bit more about Cadeau's panic and his anxiety, and gets to know him as a person a little bit more, and starts to come to respect him as a prince and as a leader. So there is definitely some romance starting at this point, or there's tension there, I will say. I'm right at a 50% mark. There was another character who Cadeau had romantic and or sexual entanglements with that we don't really get to see very much of on page. So I'm not really sure how much we are going to see with Evermare on page, but there's been some tension there, and it's definitely brewing. I feel like the author has been doing a good job drawing out these characters and laying out their foundations and setting up a lot of time where they are spending together and getting to know each other. And so I think it's bodyguard romance might be understating it because of the level that Evermare is able to participate in the investigation with Cadeau, and some of his responsibilities is more than just like a dumb bodyguard, for example. And so I think that there is some good characterization that's been happening. I think that the characterization on some sort of secondary and tertiary characters has been a little less, but we're mainly focusing on the two point of views of our two main characters. So I'm definitely interested in this book. I'm finding it very easy to keep turning pages. It definitely is long, but yeah, I'm enjoying this, and I will tune back in at the end with my final thoughts. Hi. Okay, so I have finished A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland, and here are my overall and final thoughts. I felt like the strength of this book really lies in the characters, or characterization of Prince Cadeau and also of Evermare. I feel like we get to really see a lot of facets of their just both of their personalities and also sort of how they interact. There is a really great foundation of emotional development throughout the book because they spend so much time together and are so closely like in proximity and constantly together. And so I felt like the foundation was laid really well, and we get to see Evermare and how his preconceptions are challenged, and then over time, you know, his opinions of Cadeau are like broken down and altered, and at the same time, like he is starting to fall for the prince, and also like we, the reader, are falling for both of them, and it's just great. And I really liked how Prince Cadeau has a couple moments of weakness and like, you know, what he considers to be cowardice, but I feel that we are constantly getting to see him trying to do better and trying to be a better person, and he has this inherent tenderness that really made me love him as a character. And I felt like he was kind of soft, but also had this inner core of steel that was important and that we do get to see come out later on in the book. So I felt like the dual perspectives and the laying of this intense foundation of building up over time, even though the book had a relatively short time frame overall, I felt like it really laid great groundwork to believe in the romance here. With regards to the writing of this story, I felt like structurally it followed what I would consider relatively common for a lot of fantasy books, which is somewhat of an info dump right at the start. You're kind of tossed into the middle of things and have to navigate what's going on and figure things out as you go. So it took me a minute to find some firm footing here, but I did like the setup of the culture and of the setting. And over the course of the book, I felt like that was a part of the story and actually was relevant to both the characters and their beliefs and their characterization, but also to the plot of the story. So I appreciated the setting work that was done, even if it was a little tough to start the book that way. I also felt like there were a couple events that were told right at the start of the book happen sort of off page, and there's a lot of introduction to a lot of characters, and so that was maybe one of the things that kind of slowed me personally down. But once we get our two main characters together and we have a situation and they have sort of a goal, I felt like things kind of leveled out. And while I did feel that the book tended to feel a little bit long, I was enjoying things and turning pages, and I felt like I personally appreciated the length because we got that emotional development and foundation setting, as I mentioned before. I do feel like the second half of the book kind of had a little bit of a shift in the overall tone and vibe. I just felt like it started to almost lighten and shift, and like some points kind of turned a little comedic or a little too easily plotted. Maybe the bad guy or guys or people like kind of were a little bit of a caricature, like a little bit like twirling my mustache kind of situation. So, I felt like that could have been a little bit more nuanced. I felt like I could see anyway the bad guy coming from a long way off. And I also felt like one of the side characters who becomes more of a stronger component of the book later on, Tadek, he also somewhat became a little bit of a caricature, I felt, and really was functioning strongly as comedic relief. And while I think that a little bit of that could have been helpful, I felt like there was sort of like, whoa, we gotta lighten this up a bit, and it was sort of a stronger shift than I noticed overall. I did kind of wonder what the target audience for this book is, because the fact that there is like sort of minimal on page any sort of sexual activity sort of implied to me that the target reader would be a young adult audience. And overall, the last thing I'll say about the writing is that I wanted more of the like tasting metal component to be relevant to this book. I think that like to some extent the part of the plot, like some of the main plot, is that they're investigating counterfeiting, and the way that counterfeiting can be detected is by these people who have the ability to taste metal. So it wasn't irrelevant, but if you have a cool magical ability, like I wanted it to come up more than just like, oh, there's political reasons why this prince would be concerned about the country's like standing and reputation. And I just was, I felt like the only other element that we got to hear about for a magical ability was this ability to detect lies that comes in from a character later. And I was like, that's a pretty cool idea. Like I almost would have been more interested to have a main character who had that ability. And it just sort of felt a little bit like, why are there only these two abilities? Is this like genetic? Like I just felt like that area of like the little bit of magical realism, magical fantasy element was just kind of like plopped in to some extent. I don't know. It was important, but also it was just kind of like, I wanted more from the magical elements. That being said, I do feel like the setting was super, I guess I did start this off saying that I felt like the characterizations were really strong, but I will say that I liked the super casual inclusion of all of the like relationship and sexual identities and also like gender identities throughout this book. It just was completely built in and seamless that there are more than two genders, and that there's no question that there are same sex and different sex or whatever combinations thereof that you want to count as options for people. And so I just felt really great to not have my sister the Sultan is going to make me get married someday to a woman. It was sort of understood that the Sultan would take Cadeau's preferences into account, so that was great too. While I cannot speak to Cadeau's anxiety and panic attacks in like actuality or their realness or factual basis or whatsoever, I felt like that element was done very well and very interesting. And I do think that it was very realistic to not have his concerns and problems kind of disappear by the end of the book. It was not this like condition that he just like grew out of or psychologically convinced himself was fine, or that love magically like cured in any way. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. I did end up giving it a 5 stars on Goodreads, but I think that it was like probably more realistically closer to like a 4.5 for me personally, but I'm not gonna like split hairs there. And yeah, I felt like the political aspects, the cultural aspects were really well done. I wanted a little bit more from the magic, but I felt that the setting and structure of the culture that we got was important for the book, and I ultimately really enjoyed the romance element, which was what I wanted. And so I think I would definitely be interested in another book in this world. I don't know for sure if this is part of a series. It doesn't, Goodreads does not give any sort of indication that this is potentially part of a series, but I think it would be really cool to have more in this world because I really enjoyed that element. However, it would have to be just as strong on the romance. So yeah, I felt like this would definitely be a book recommended for someone who wants to sort of bridge that gap between fantasy and romance, or who wants to read romance sort of within this mildly fantastical setting. And I read somewhere on Goodreads or some of the reviews saying that people were like, this is just too many tropes. And I'm like, have you read a romance? Like, that was sort of the point for me. So there definitely is mutual pining, only one bed, oaths, promises made to each other. This is a slow burn. There's like a required, like, we have to kiss to be sneaky kind of situation. And this is a bodyguard romance. But I definitely think that bodyguard sort of simplifies things based on the role of the Kaya that Evermere plays. So if any of those tropes sound interesting, or hopefully I have pitched this book to you in a way that sounds interesting, I would definitely recommend it. So definitely go and check out A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland. If you have read this title or other books by this author, definitely let me know down below if there's something else by this author that you recommend. And yeah, otherwise, thanks so much for coming, and I'll see you next time. Bye.